Today's topic is an unusual topic, but a necessary topic for us to examine. Now, the topic is called behavioral patterns of boys who grow up without a father. Behavioral patterns of boys who grow up without a father. So what is this talking about? This is talking about the patterns of behavior. What are the patterns of behavior that are peculiar to men who grow up without, or boys who grow up without a father? What are the peculiar behavioral patterns? How do they behave? How do men or women who grow up without, especially men, I will start with the men. When we talk about patterns, we are talking about the usual, regular things that somebody does, more like a habit. But a habit is more like something that is habitual, that they do, and it's more like you are dependent, you are addicted to it. That's more like a habit. But a pattern is something you come back to, you refer back to when a similar situation happens. So let's say a habit could be the fact that you cannot do without smoking, or a habit could be you cannot do without going to church, or a habit could be you cannot do without praying. But a pattern is how you respond to life situations. So let's say, how do you respond when things are difficult, for example? So when things are difficult, you always behave in similar ways. But when things are okay, you are okay. Or when things are good, you respond in a different way. But when things are bad, you change. So patterns are how we behave at given situations. But that's what I'm trying to talk about, that there are certain patterns that could be observed in boys who grow up without a father. There are some behaviors that are peculiar to people who grow up without fathers. And there are some behavioral traits you will see in these people. And one thing about behavioral patterns is that, can you believe it? People will behave the same, even though they don't know each other. People will behave the same, even though they have not been taught to behave that way. People will behave the same, even though they live in different continents. Can you believe it? How powerful these things are. And sometimes we Christians just go to church and we just think that, somebody became born again and that is all. I've made a lot of mistakes as a pastor, thinking like that and not paying attention to some of these details. Sometimes the way, especially being born again in Africa, the understanding of church and the understanding of salvation to us was that since you got saved, everything, old things are past and new things are new. I used to think just like that. I used to think the same way and say, all things are passed away, all things are gone, and everything is new. So if you are born again, it means you are born again. Everything, forget about everything. Everything is just okay. That is on one hand. So we used to think that the most important thing, especially the girls used to think that, some of them are still thinking like that. I think even some pastors are still thinking like that. The most important thing is that don't marry an unbeliever. Don't marry an unbeliever. As long as he's a Christian, as long as he's born again, it's okay. So if he's born again, it means it's okay. But there are a lot of other things that even if you are born again, you need to work on. Especially in terms of growing up without a father. If you are a boy or you are a girl, you grow up without a father, there are some things that need to be corrected in your life. There are some things that need to be fixed. There are some things that you must know. There are some things that you must work on. There are some things that you must fix. there are some things that you must challenge in yourself and you must correct. If you don't correct them, they will go and influence your marital life, and they might even go and destroy it. And whichever that girl is, she will just be, who marries a boy like that, she will go and end up suffering a lot. And she will be suffering and not know why. And she will always be wondering, but I thought he's born again now. But he's born again. Why should he be behaving like that? But he's a member of the church. Why is he behaving like that? But he's born again. Why is it that he has this behavior, he has that behavior? Because it's not enough that we just say somebody is born again. It's not enough that we say somebody comes to church or has given his life to Christ. We should realize that giving your life to Christ only affects immediately your spirit man. It changes your spirit man. But you need to also renew your mind. Apart from your spiritual person, you have a mind as well. And you have a soul. And you have emotions. And you have feelings. And in those your feelings and emotions, some things have been recorded there. So there are some, for example, your feelings record and your emotions have recorded some of the old things you experienced. For example, let's say you went and touched electricity. Even though you are no more touching electricity every day, but your memory and your emotions and your feelings has recorded the feelings and the pain that you went through that experience. So your memory records things. Your emotion has recorded some things. So let's say you are being beaten or abused as a child, or your parents were wicked to you, or they didn't love you. Your emotions record those things. Your emotions, even when you are still young, your emotions will record some of those abuses that you went through, and your feelings will record them. And those things remain in you. They remain in your soul. So even though you are born again, but those things don't always go automatically. Those things don't always disappear automatically. So the fact that you are born again does not make you perfect immediately. The fact that you are born again does not make you to be suitable for marriage or for wedding immediately, or to be a father, or to even be a full-fledged man. That doesn't qualify you to be a man yet. So it's unfortunate that so many believers, so many born-again people, we think that as long as you are born again, that you're okay, that everything is all right, that, that's okay, that's the only thing you need to do. And unfortunately, in a lot of churches, or even denominations, or church traditions, like charismatic church tradition and Pentecostal church tradition, we tend to believe too much in what the Holy Ghost will do or in what God will do. So we put all the responsibility on God and the Holy Spirit, and we say, oh, but God, you are saved. If you have saved, God has taken away everything. All things are passed away, everything are new. But the guy still behaves. He himself believes that everything is gone, but he doesn't know that there are still some things for him to struggle with. For example, as a man, if you used to watch pornography before you became born again, even though you are set free now, you are no more watching pornography. But that memory, that thing, those things that you used to see, those images, they are still hidden in you. They are still in your subconscious mind somewhere. So the fact that you are no more looking at pornography right now does not mean that that you are totally set free from it, or that does not mean that you will not suffer from the consequence of the pornography that you used to watch. Because now, one of the ways that a man will suffer is that when you now get married, or you are now making love to your wife, you might begin to remember some of those pictures that you saw. So there are some works that you need to see. There are some work that you need to do, to clean yourself, to purify yourself, and to make yourself ready, to make yourself prepared, and to make yourself qualified to be a real man and a father. Because there are some patterns, behavioral patterns, that will remain with you as a man or as a woman if you grow up without a father. If you are also a man that you had started having extramarital affairs and sexual intercourse before you got born again, even though you have stopped you have stopped doing that and you are no more involved with extramarital sex, but after you are married, you will see that there are still some consequences that you would still need to deal with. And the fact that you are having extramarital sex will affect you later on. And the reason is not because you are not born again, because you are having you are having sex or adultery or fornication, not with your spirit. It is your spirit that is born again. But when you are saved, and those things that you did before you got saved, they still remain in your emotions. They are recorded in your emotions, they are recorded in your feelings, and they are recorded in your memory, in the subconscious level of your memory. So that is how we form our patterns, our behavioral patterns. So when I'm talking about behavioral patterns, I'm talking about some of those things that are recorded on our subconscious level that we automatically respond, that dictates our response automatically, that make us to respond in certain ways. For example, I, as a pastor here in Ukraine, maybe it's not just in Ukraine, I think it's everywhere. In this culture, there are some people who don't believe, and I think in the West also, especially America, they are now propagating this kind of moral. Okay, in this culture, there are some families or some people who don't believe that you should beat or punish a child. So now a lot of those category and generation of people, they are now adults that their parents never punished them and their parents never beat them. So I used to have a secretary like that, and the parents never beat her and they never punished her. So she doesn't know what is beating or punishing. So now, even though she's a grown-up lady, she's almost going to be 40, anytime that anybody tries to correct her or do anything that inflicts pain on her, she breaks down totally. She begins to cry, she begins to weep, she begins to do scandal, she becomes hysterical. Just because you tell her anything you tell her is a problem, becomes a crisis. Why? Because that is the things that are recorded in her subconscious, that anything, because one time she was beaten when she was small, and that was like she was beaten as a punishment or act unfairly. So any kind of punishment that she sees now is like evil to her. So because that's what has been recorded in her mind. And the same thing happened with a lot of people. There are some people now who are grown-ups that think that any kind of pain is bad. And even there are some churches who propagate this, that if you come across any suffering or pain or any trouble, that is evil, that is bad. It means Satan is at work, which is wrong. So any kind of thing that God allows in your life to develop you or to lift you up to another level, you begin to fight it, you begin to resist it. Why? Because it has been recorded in your mind. It has been recorded in your subconscious mind that it is wrong to suffer any pain, that anything painful is bad, anything negative is bad. So these are the things I'm talking about, that there are some things that we call behavioral patterns. And those behavioral patterns must be dealt with. But before you could deal with them, you must be, first of all, aware. Only those things that you are aware can you challenge. Only those things that you are aware of can you change. So let's talk about boys that are growing up without a real man, without a father. So if you are a boy that is growing up without a father, or even a girl, there are some behavioral patterns that are peculiar to you. And it doesn't matter what country you are. It doesn't matter if you grew up in Africa, or you grew up in Europe, or you grew up in America, or you grew up in Latin America. They are the same patterns that have been observed and that are consistent with the behavior of boys who never had a father figure in their lives, or who never had a fatherly love in their lives. Even though they might have a father for one reason or the other, maybe the father had not played his role, and because he had not played the role he needed to play, those boys carry the consequence of those things. So some of those things need to be corrected much more, early in life or later in life, wherever you are aware of it. But the fact that we must talk about this is important. The fact that we must reveal and expose these things is also vital. Even the girls, there are some behavioral patterns that are just in you. So sometimes, maybe, I think this is popular enough. Have you ever heard of cases whereby somebody said, my father did this, and I said I will never do the same thing, but you grow up and you begin to do the same thing your father did? Or your father experienced something, or something happened in your family, and you begin to recall that happened to this other person, it happened to this other person, it happened to this other person, and other family members are repeating those things. Those are the things we call behavioral patterns. Unfortunately, in Africa, there is another ignorance and another extreme. In churches in Nigeria, either people deny it totally and say that you don't have any, you are born again, all things are new, all old things are gone, everything is new now. Or they will tell you that it is generational curses. They will begin to tell you that you have curse and you have been cursed and you need deliverance. So ignorance is just pervasive in some churches, especially charismatic Pentecostal churches. They begin to put everything under demons. They will forget that even though you are already saved, even though the blood of Jesus has already redeemed you, even though Jesus has already died for you, even though the Bible has said that curse is everyone that hangs on the tree, even though Jesus has carried away your your cross is on the tree, they will still be telling and convincing believers that they are cursed, or they have some generational curses, or they need deliverance. There are some churches where they are conducting deliverance service every week. There are some churches where they conduct deliverance services every week. And this is just crazy. Some of those people who will be coming for those deliverances are the same members of that church. So if they are members of the church, why do they still need deliverance? Ignorance. Because they don't know and they don't have any idea about what science has already discovered long time ago, what science has already dealt with. And the thing is that these things they are trying to deliver are behavioral patterns. They are called behavioral patterns. And behavioral patterns cannot be cast out by demons or by the Holy Spirit, you cannot just cast out behavioral patterns. It's just like saying like I said earlier on, if you are, let's say you are 5 years old and you went and touched electricity and you experienced a shock. Now, because you have that electricity shock, that shock is recorded in your subconscious level, in your conscious mind, in your subconscious mind. That shock is recorded in your emotions. That shock is recorded in your feelings. So anytime you see electricity that is not protected, you are careful. You don't want to touch it again because you remember the bad experience that you had. Or it's just the same thing like with fire. I remember that when I was small, my grandmother used to say, don't touch fire or don't go to that fire. And I was curious, why is it red? Why is it yellow? Why is it that some part of it are yellow sometimes and some of it are red? And why is it that some of them are blue? So I wanted to find out, I wanted to separate the fire, the blue and the red. You know the result. You know the result. It was not pretty. It was not pretty. Not pretty at all. So, of course, I got my hand burnt. So, as a result of that, do you think I forgot? I will forget. So now it's just like, so what the people do in churches by saying you need deliverance from that, you need deliverance from this, you need deliverance from this. Oh, your mother didn't marry on time, or your sisters didn't marry, your two sisters didn't marry, and your aunt didn't marry, and your nephew did not marry, and your cousin, your aunt there did not marry. 3 of them have not married. They have been married for this. They are 20 years old or 40 years old. They are yet to marry. That one died of cancer. This one died of cancer. Maybe you too will die of cancer. This one remains single. That one will remain single. That one doesn't have money. This one doesn't have money. Nobody has money. So is Satan, is deliverance, is this, and they are doing it every week or every month or every year. Just taking away poor people's money, and it's like fleecing on the people of God. But like I said, with that fire and electricity, since you have put that thing there, it records something in you, and it brings a kind of pattern of reaction out of you, no matter what. So whenever you go around electricity, or you go around fire, the same pattern of behavior will be manifested, because you will have the same response to that electricity like you had before when somebody said, when you went and touched it. So if anybody tells you now, touch electricity or move back, you have the same pattern. And that same pattern of behavior, it will be the same for Chinese, it will be the same for Americans, it will be the same for Japanese, it will be the same for Africans, it will be the same for Brazilians, it will be the same for every people, because the same pattern of behavior, the same response, it is universal, because it is recorded in your subconscious mind. So you respond to the same thing the same way. The same thing we are talking about when we come to children who grow up without fathers. So now come and imagine that a man now comes and says, oh, don't worry, the thing you need is deliverance. You need deliverance from that feeling, electricity feeling. You need deliverance from that reaction, or from that pattern of behavior that you have with this electricity. It doesn't matter how many demons they cast out from you. It doesn't matter how many times they destroy the whatever they call it, the curses, the generational curses. Nothing will happen, because it's not about generational curses right now, and it's not about deliverance right now. It's about behavioral patterns. These are behavioral patterns that need to be detected, you need to get back to the root of those behavioral patterns, and then you need to be able to deal with them. So when you grow up, when we talk about behavioral patterns, I just gave you a clear illustration of behavioral patterns, how you behave that way because of what you had experienced. So with electricity, you behave that way because of what has been recorded in your subconscious mind, because of what you had experienced. The same thing with fire, you behave that way because of what you had experienced. And those things happen, behavioral patterns come as a result of one thing or the other that has been recorded either on our subconscious mind or in our emotions, or just somewhere, in our feelings, because of what we have heard, or because of what we have experienced, or because of what we have believed. So some of those things just need to be dealt with through understanding and through conscious action, and that is geared towards changing that behavioral pattern, rather than going from one deliverance house to the other, or from one generational curses to the other, and all that. So of course God could help. We could pray that God will help us. But you see, God does miracles, but miracle is not anything that happens just anyhow. The possibilities of miracle is just 2% in our daily life. I mean, every day we live by normal laws, by normal rules and principles. It's not everything that, you don't have miracles just because, you don't ask for miracles just because you want to eat. And you have the food already, you have the plate, you have the food on your table, and you now say, okay, God should do miracle for the food to get to your stomach. That doesn't happen. You have to take the fork and the knife and put it in your mouth yourself. So it is the order of things, the order of life. You are supposed to live a normal life, not wait for miracles all the time. So the same thing when it comes to patterns when it comes to behavioral patterns. When it comes to behavioral patterns as well, we don't need to always be saying only by miracles you will change. Only miracles will do this. Only deliverance will do this. Or only, some supernatural, interference of God. Sometimes you just need the truth. The Bible says you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. The Bible also says that my people are perished for lack of knowledge. For lack of knowledge. So... So when we are talking about behavioral patterns, this is very important topic, because in fact, there are some ministries and churches that are thriving on fleecing the people, that are thriving on, telling people some funny stories and deceiving people and taking people's money and just exploiting people, taking advantage of people just for them to get deliverance or to get set free from generational curses or things like that. So I'm sorry, somebody is writing about psychics here. No, we don't need that. I'm sorry. So so it is. So when those things are happening, you must first of all find out what is happening to you, and you must realize why these things are happening to you. And because if you go to the root of the matter, it will be easier for you to be able to know exactly what is happening to you. Most people that have behavioral patterns, they might not even realize why. Many people just think that is the way they are supposed to live. Many people who grew up without fathers or mothers or let's say fathers right now, they don't even know why they behave the way they think everybody behaves the way they behave. They think they are okay. Some things that you might not understand, especially if you are married to such a man, you might not understand, why is he doing this? Why can't he understand this? And you don't know that he doesn't even know what you are talking about. He is not even aware that things are not supposed to be like that. He thinks that things are okay. He thinks that he's okay. He thinks that he is. And especially now, in the world that we are living in, I think more than 50% of all families in the world are now single parents or divorced or remarried. So can you imagine the world where most people, most couples, most families are either divorced or remarried or single parents? Can you imagine how much this topic is needed? Can you imagine how many people are growing up without their fathers? And even if they have fathers, they might have males in the homes, but not fathers. They might have men, or so to say men, so-called men in the house, but not having fathers. So can you imagine how much this topic and this subject is needed all over the world, because so many people are growing up without fathers, without father figures, or even if they have so-called men in their lives, they still don't play any role. They are just absentee fathers. So if the absentee fathers are growing in our world today, if homes are without, children are growing up without a real father model or father figure, so we must talk about this. So what are the patterns that are peculiar or particular to this kind of children, both boys and girls who grow up without a father? And we must be able to be aware of them, and even mothers must be aware of these things, and we must be able to begin to deal with these things even from the time they are small. And the mothers must be told of how to deal with situations if they are single parents, if they are mothers who are raising up their children by themselves. They must be able to know how to address this situation of fatherlessness or absentee father, and how to help the kids cope and deal with the situation of patterns, of behavioral patterns. And so today, talking about, like I said, I'm going to start by talking about behavioral patterns for boys who grew up without a father. When a boy grows up without a father, there are two main behavioral patterns that they demonstrate. There are two major behavioral patterns that are demonstrated by the boys who grew up without a father. Two main behavioral patterns. And each one of them would take me like several topics, several teachings to go through. But let me just mention to you the main behavioral patterns. Psychologists and experts, they call them two. I don't know how they call them. They are in their own language, in the psychological language. But one is the first category is. I will use my own language. I hope it's the same as they call it. But I think they call them aggressors or aggressive nature, aggressive patterns. So the first behavioral patterns that the boys who grew up without a father figure, or they might have a father, like I said, especially in our African tradition, when you have a father in the house, but the father is not relating with the son, it's the same thing as having no father. So when you have, a boy grows up without a father figure who is really caring and is there for him, the first pattern of behavior it demonstrates is aggressive nature, aggressive. So the first pattern of behavior for the boys without a father is aggressive, being aggressive, aggressive nature, aggressive pattern of behavior. The second pattern of behavior that a boy like that demonstrates is what we call passive nature, passive pattern of life, passive, quiet and passive lifestyle, quiet and passive. But both of them are negative. Both of them are not good. And I will tell you why they are bad, what makes them to be negative, and what we can do to come out of them and to fix these problems. So let's start with the first behavioral pattern of the boy that grows up without a father, and that first negative pattern of behavior for the boy is that he's aggressive. And is we could just say aggressive pattern of behavior. It's like an aggressor. It's aggressive. So how does that manifest? How do we see that? What do we say? How is that manifested? And if you are a mother, how do you cope with that? With an aggressive child? That is who I was. Let me start with my own story. Wow. And the painful thing about this is that I never knew what was happening. I didn't have an idea of what was happening because I never saw my father. And my mother, I only saw her when I was about 12 years old, when I was already grown up, much later in life. But what I discovered was my response. I was growing up at first normally, like a normal child. Everything was okay. Till I was maybe 12, 13. Let me tell you what, between the age of, I think, 11 and 14, I contemplated suicide like 3 times. Because that is the response. And that's what I was trying to explain to you in the beginning. That a pattern of behavior, the difference I told you in the beginning, the big difference between a habit and a pattern is that a pattern is how you respond to similar situations or a particular situation that comes up. So when things were good, we were growing up and we had everything till I was age 6. It was at age 6 that everything just went very bad. We lost our the breadwinners of the family. And so I had to go with my grandmother to the bush to be getting firewood, and so things were rough. And the first manifestation of my aggressive nature, of my pattern of behavior, aggressive nature as being fatherless, was that I would always get annoyed, and angry. And this kind of anger that is, it's not measurable with whatever happened. It's not in sync with what happened. Like a small thing that is not supposed to bring so much anger, so much aggression, so much. Some people would have just responded to it easy or passed by it. But in my situation, it was always violent anger, bitterness, and violence. I was always, when I was angry, I was always looking to destroy something, to take revenge, to break some things, to make other people feel pain. Especially my grandmother, because my grandmother was the one who was like my father and my mother. She was the only one I had, and she was the only person I knew. So all my anger and all that were directed towards her and at her. So can you imagine that? Let me tell you a situation that I wrote in my book, Olorunwa. If you have not read my book, Olorunwa, my biography, that's my biography. It's called Olorunwa. If there is anybody here, please write that word Olorunwa out properly. If you could write it Olorunwa, that is, you can write it in big letters. If you are looking for the book on Amazon or on Okada Books, you need to write it properly. Olorunwa by Pastor Sunday Adelaja. It's my biography. It's one word. Ladapo Abiodun wrote it like two different words, but it's one word. So that used to be my village name, and so that if you want to read the book, you can get the book on Amazon or on Okada Books or somewhere in the internet. So I will not go into the details of the story, but let me just tell you a little bit about how aggressive nature was responding in me. Let's say my mother or my grandmother beats me or punishes me for something. I will go, either I will run away from the house, or I will go and begin to speak very bad, accusive and abusive words against her. Or I would go and take her best clothes, and go and set them on fire. I would go and find matchbox. Sometime one day I went into a wardrobe. They had this wardrobe in a room. She only had one room. That woman only had one room where I was living with her. So I noticed that she had gone out and she had all her clothes in the wardrobe. I went with a matchbox. Abraham, great. That is not my name. What you wrote is not Olorunwa. So I went and took a matchbox and a kerosene and went and sprayed the whole wardrobe with kerosene and set everything on fire. Can you imagine all the clothes that this woman had in her life? Things were just, this was like, it was like demon. I understand why in Africa people only talk about demon possession. It was really like demon possession. It was like demonic. But this is how anger works. It depends on the depth of the anger, of course. But in my own case, I was not just having no father, but I was not having a father. I was not having a mother. And then what led me to that was because we were also living in some incredible abject poverty. The poverty level was so bad that, it was... And I will explain to you what I was feeling, because you might be thinking, what were you feeling? What was happening in your heart that time? Like I said, I tried to commit suicide 3 times, just I didn't know how to do it. And another time, when she punished me, I went and I knew that when she was always going to a party or to the church on Sunday, that there was something that was important to her, because I was always looking for how to hurt her. And I knew that she was always wearing jewelries. And she was always talking about, jewelries and saving to buy jewelries, and how, she couldn't buy jewelries and she only had 1 jewelry or 2 jewelry. But she had a small box like that, where she put all her earrings and jewels and things like that. So one time when she punished me, I just went, looked for that box where she kept all her jewelries. And this was a 60-year-old woman, a 65-year-old woman with all her treasures, all her lifetime savings, all her lifetime treasure, all her lifetime treasure. I went, took that box of everything she was, went to the bush, to the forest, dug the soil, digging the soil, and just buried that box, that whole thing. I buried it somewhere in the bush. I didn't even remember the place again. And I just left. I forgot where I buried it in. That was the end. Ooh. So the reason I'm telling you this is for you just to know how bad things could be for boys who grow up without a father. And this is a pattern. And maybe so like I said, my own situation was so bad. The wickedness, the naughtiness, what word can you use? The hooliganism, the haughtiness, everything was so bad. I mean, this is not counting fighting, no. This is not counting fighting, picking up a fight every time with my mates, with friends, just fighting everywhere. So what was it that was happening to me? So how does this work in the life of a young boy or a man? And these are some of the reasons why a father needed to be there. A father needed to be there to cope those kind of things. A father needed to be there to bring that sense of security to a boy, even to the girl. A father, the need for a father is that a father will bring that peace that I never had. I never had that peace of mind. The father is supposed to bring that assurance, that affirmation, that assurance, that pillar, that covering, that foundation, that firm foundation. I never had... So a father was supposed to have helped deal with the emotions. I didn't know what to do with the emotions. I didn't know how to manage the emotions. And especially when I encounter pain, and when I encountered punishment, or I encountered anything that will inflict pain on me, I was always responding in an unusual way like this. But I never knew that it's because I grew up without a father figure. Even though I noticed that my grandmother, she attempted, maybe she kind of noticed that a father figure was what I was lacking. Even though she was illiterate, but she would always go and call some uncles. But you see, I was living in the village, and these uncles, one of them was living in Lagos, and one of them was living in Ibadan. But I was living in Jebu, the village there, and these uncles would, you know the way people do in Africa, they come home maybe once in a year or twice a year. They come home once a year or twice a year. So I noticed that when these men, and the reason why she was always referring to those particular uncles was because they were military men. They were in the military. The two of them were in the military. So she was always trying to frighten me by them, and frighten me and say, "This your soldier brother will come, the soldier." And the kids always were afraid of soldiers. But what I noticed was that when those uncles would come to the village, and I was always afraid that they are coming, they are soldiers, they are going to. But what I discovered is that they would not act like a soldier to me. They would not beat me or try to punish me. They would always draw me close. They would hug me and begin to talk to me like adults. I never even knew anything like that. I never even knew that was possible. I mean, that a big man, a big grown-up man will hug me. I never had a hug of a man. I never had a father or man hugging me, bringing that covering and protection. So I noticed that each time any one of those uncles will come around and just love on me. You see, a kid needs the father's love. My anger will just evaporate and disappear. I will just become quiet and stable, and my emotions become just stable. But they will go, and the next 1 week or 2 weeks, I will be okay. Maybe 1 month, I will behave well. Maybe 2 months, my mother will be happy. She will be proud of me. Until, in 2 months, it lasts me maximum 2 months. They go back, and I begin to behave the same way. And the reason is because the father is not supposed to be a visiting father. A father is not supposed to be just once in a month or once in a year father. A father is supposed to be there for the children all the time. A father is supposed to be present. It's not supposed to be absentee father. A father is not to be absentee in the sense that he's coming just once in a year or once in 6 months. A father is supposed to be there caring for that son most of the time. So the presence of a father brings that stability. At least, even if you are not going to be there all the time, but even if you don't have a father and you need a father figure, let the person be there at least once a month, not once a year or once in 6 months. Because I noticed that each time these people came home and they talked to me like that, I was always well behaved. I was always better behaved and felt I loved and protected. Something just comes over me, cool, quiet, and well behaved. But when nobody is around and I begin to experience all my pains again, and my grandmother was trying always to correct me, and I will be frustrated, all that anger will swell up again. So anger issue is one of the things that boys who grow up without a father encounter. That is one of the things that they encounter. And now in my own case, even though I didn't know these things, let me tell you how it went. Let me tell you how it disappeared. This anger issue disappeared. Even before I got born again. But when I got born again, God totally, dealt with it. It was the end of it. But before I got born again, also, it was over. What happened was, sometimes we don't know why tragedies happen, right, in our lives. But sometimes if God is really interested in you, if God really helps you, loves you, He will give you help from a way that you might not expect. So in my own case, the way I got my deliverance, because if that thing had not happened that time, I won't be here today. You would not be seeing me today. What happened was that my grandmother, who was to me like my mother and my father, she was the only one I knew. She got sick when I was 15. she got sick of cancer, and she had to be in the hospital like for a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe a year. And I was left alone in the village. And so I started realizing all the sacrifice she was going through, all the things that she was doing for me, because we were going to the bush with her, two of us before, to get the firewood and all that. Now I had to do all that by myself, and we were doing ogi. Ogi is like custard, like corn custard, in our local corn custard, but it's made not from corn. Yeah, I think it's made from corn. Yeah, corn custard. Yeah, it's like pap, they call it in Africa. I don't know if that is English pap or something. Anyway, so that custard, she used to teach me how to do it, and we used to do it together. But now I had to do everything myself. So the reality of losing her and of her disappearing from my life, and just the reality of I was dropped to the ground, but still I had not changed to the end. Even though she was absent for a year, and in that whole year I was behaving well, and because I needed to fence for myself. Reality came in, I needed to survive. So, okay, Davida said, I'm surprised no other relative could step in. Oh yeah, well, it's a very complex situation, very complex story. Before this time, like I said, before now, things were okay. But then, this was all after our family went through a very bad tragedy. And that tragedy was that we lost 3 prominent children in 1 year to death. So the breadwinners, the real influential people, the real successful people in the family died in quick succession. And so what we are talking about, family and relatives. In Africa there is, that's why I say you should go get that book, Olorunwa. The book is called Olorunwa. Go get it on Amazon. You can read my story there. So what happens is that, when a woman is experiencing the death of her children in Africa, especially grown-up children, successful children, the way people relate to that woman and that family as a whole. They think that she's a witch, or she's the one who killed her own children, and people will take their stand. People stand off, and people are careful so that they will not become victims. Anyway, a lot of stories there. But if you go and get that Olorunwa book, it will help you. Anyway, where did I stop before I saw that comment? Yeah, so even though my mother was in the hospital and I was now feeling better and things like that, I was behaving better. But I knew that inside, that anger was still hidden inside. It was still somewhere. And if she comes back and everything goes back to its place again, to how it was, I was still going to be behaving the way I was behaving. But then comes the news one day when I was 16 already, that my grandmother died. Now, that tragedy, as painful as that could have been, I was now 16 or going to be 16, and this is my mother and father, everything, and she was the only one I was living with, because all my other brothers brother and sister who were a little bit grown, they were students themselves, but they were in town. They were also trying to survive. So, at this time, I was the only one in the village with her. And here she was dead. Oh, it's one thing to live without her for 1 year. But to now come with the news that she's totally dead, and I was 16, and I was in secondary school. First of all, I have to buy school uniform, pen, eat, go to school. Thank God for Awolowo. Awolowo is a free education proponent in our area. If not for that, thank God I didn't need to pay for school fees. Anyway, but thank God for the death of my sometimes, because at that time I thought this is the most wicked thing God could have allowed. There is no God. I was thinking there is no God in this world. How can there be God? There is no God. I don't have a father. I don't have a mother. And now my grandmother is taken when I'm 16. This is just horrible. There is no God. God is wicked and all this. I wanted to commit suicide. I ran to the bush. I ran to the jungle there. There is a place there in that bush they used to call, I think in most villages you have some places in the bush where they say you shouldn't go to, right? That men shouldn't go, boys or girls or women shouldn't go to, and all kind of mysterious places like that. So I ran in there. I wanted something to come out and kill me. I wanted the gods there or the demons there to come out. I just wanted to die. But I didn't die. The men in the village ran after me and rescued me. I cried my heart out. That was what broke me. So I started regretting that, how did I treat this woman? And I started regretting. And my biggest regret was not even the fact that she died or how I was going to survive, but the fact that she never saw me good. That she never saw the good part of me. That all her investment in me, she only knew me bad. She only knew me as naughty, wicked, hooligan, stubborn. She only knew me as bad. And that is why I co-authored the book that lady was talking about that day, that we wrote a book together, How to Avoid the Biggest Regret of Life. Personally, the biggest regret of my life was that I was not grateful to my mother. She was my grandmother, but she was really my mother. But I was not grateful to my mother while she was alive. That I was not there for her. I didn't behave. She never got to reap anything from me, from all our investments. So that was so painful. I mean, I don't know how to describe, but I think there is no greater pain than not being able to say thank you to your mother. Anyway, so that feeling of regret brought me to a deep state of repentance, brokenness. So I started, from getting annoyed at God, I started begging God for forgiveness and making a deal with God. Even though I was not a believer, but I was begging God and saying, I make a deal with you. I will never pass by any you. If you make me to be successful in life, if you help me to make it, I will add all the things that I wanted to do for this woman, all the gratitude I wanted to express to her, all the thanks, all the things I owe her. Because when she was away for 1 year, I was planning. I was saying I was going to be successful. I was going to go abroad. I was going to study. I was going to become like my uncles, like my brothers who were successful. I was going to become this and this. And as a result, I was going to make her life better. I was going to build a house for her. I was going to get a car, a driver. I was just fantasizing. I was just living in fantasy of all what I wish I could do for her. All the things that her children that she lost couldn't do for her. I was planning and I was dreaming of doing those things for her. I couldn't wait for her to come. And I was saying that I was going to treat her better. I was really going to, I was thinking God was going to give me that second chance. So now that I didn't have the second chance, I was now telling God that, please, this thing that I couldn't do for my grandmother, I would never allow if I have any opportunity to express gratitude or to do good to any human being, I will never anymore pass by another person without doing to them what I was supposed to do on time. So that totally changed that is how my value system started forming. So but the very first consciously formed value system that I knew that came from my own decision was that one, that I would never pass by anybody again without doing good to them. And for me, in my own heart, I'm doing good to my grandmother. I'm repaying my grandmother for all she did for me. That's one. I would never be ungrateful. I will always express gratitude to anybody, even who did the very least thing to me. That's one. Number two, the second decision I took that time during all that crisis of her death was that all the good that I wanted to do for her, I would do for humanity. I would live my life to live a life of doing good. Just like she picked me up without a father and a mother, and she invested her life to me, and I couldn't restore it, and I couldn't return it back to her to show her gratitude, that now I would live a life that will show gratitude to her by showing gratitude to the whole world, to all men. And it was later on, much later, that I got saved, and I saw that, oh, that is in line with salvation and with the scriptures. And anyway, I don't know. I didn't get to talk about this. I don't know if this was helpful to you, but I have to continue the message tonight. I'm sorry for that. But yeah, I think that's all for now. But to cut the long story short, salvation helped me. So when I came to Christ, I discovered that Jesus now was my Father, and that I had a heavenly Father. So the awareness, true salvation will help, and then also, but you must work you must intentionally, consciously work on developing and altering some of those evil things that have been developed as a pattern in your life. All the things that are wrong, you must sit down with the scriptures and actually develop other qualities, other patterns to replace the evil and the bad patterns that that pain and sorrow led you into while you were growing up. So yeah. Well, thank you so very much, everyone. So God bless you. See you later. Bye.